Salt-laden winds lash against towering white cliffs, where the crash of silver-tipped waves echoes like the war drums of Poseidon himself. On the horizon, the dark silhouettes of triremes emerge, their 3 rows of oars slicing through the sea in perfect rhythm, the pounding wood in sync with the thunderous shouts of hundreds of rowers. Beyond, city walls of gleaming marble rise against the Mediterranean sun, standing like beacons of a world both radiant and proud. This is not the fertile plain of the Nile, nor the gilded palaces of the East. This is a land carved apart by jagged mountains and an endless sea, where every valley and island is its own nation. Here, men turn the ocean into their highway, and the battlefield into an arena where hoplites stand shoulder to shoulder, locked behind an impenetrable forest of spears. In Age of Empires the Seku, the name Greek conjures visions of unstoppable spear formations and unmatched warships. But history's truth is even more magnificent and far more brutal. Halls where philosophers battled with ideas, marketplaces where democracy was born, and the clang of bronze and iron in desperate struggles against the Persian Empire or the relentless duels of Athens and Sparta, all weave together into an epic saga of glory and tragedy. Today, we begin that journey. From the dawn of the Greek city-states, through their blazing golden age, to the slow fading of their light beneath the shadow of Rome. A voyage through the salt winds of the Aegean, under the glittering points of 1,000 spears, and across battlefields where their names still echo through the ages. Join us now and subscribe so you won't miss a single twist in the saga of the sea-born warriors and spear-bearing legions of Hellas. The camera sweeps low over an endless expanse of deep sapphire water. Sunlight scatters across the waves like molten gold, while gulls wheel overhead, their cries carried by the wind. In the distance, white-sailed ships cut through the sea with deliberate grace, their hulls creaking, oars dipping in perfect rhythm. Each stroke a heartbeat of the Aegean. The air is thick with salt, and the sound of water slapping against wood seems to merge with the steady thud of rowing benches. The horizon is dotted with green and brown shapes. Small islands, rugged yet inviting, each one cradled in the embrace of this restless, glittering sea. This is the cradle of ancient Greece, a jagged peninsula stretching like a hand into the Mediterranean, surrounded by hundreds of scattered islands, some no larger than a hilltop, others vast enough to sustain cities, armies, and dreams of empire. Unlike the sprawling, fertile plains of Egypt or Mesopotamia, this is a land carved apart by mountains and seas, where overland travel is slow, dangerous, and often impossible. The Greeks did not see the ocean as a barrier. They saw it as their lifeblood, a shimmering highway to trade, communication, and conquest. From the moment the first oars dipped into the water, the people of this land understood. The sea was not just their neighbor. It was their pulse. The wind that filled their sails was the same wind that carried ideas, stories, and ambitions from one rocky shore to another. But the Greece we remember, the Greece of philosophers, soldiers, and marble temples, was not born in a single moment. Its roots reach back further, to civilizations that thrived long before the word Hellas was ever spoken. To the south, on the island of Crete, the Minoans built palaces of labyrinthine complexity, their walls painted with dolphins, dancers, and gods who strode through the skies. They traded far across the seas, their ships known in harbors from Egypt to Anatolia. To the north, the Mycenaeans rose on the mainland, a warrior people whose hilltop citadels and gold-laden tombs whispered of kings and battles. They gave us stories so enduring that they still breathe today. The Iliad, the Odyssey, the sagas of Achilles, Agamemnon, and Odysseus, half-remembered history woven into immortal myth. It was from these two worlds, the maritime grace of the Minoans and the martial pride of the Mycenaeans, that Greek civilization began to take its shape. When the Minoan palaces fell and Mycenaean strongholds crumbled under the weight of time and invasion, their spirit did not vanish. It flowed into the scattered communities that rose afterward, communities that would one day call themselves the Hellenes. Picture them, small settlements clinging to rocky slopes, narrow terraces carved into the mountainside, goats picking their way between olive trees. In the harbors below, fishermen mend nets beside sleek warships, ready to sail at a moment's notice. These are not people content to be bound to their valley or island. The horizon calls to them, the unknown beckons, and yet this geography, so rich in opportunity, also shaped their destiny in another way. Each valley, each island, isolated by mountains or water, grew into its own polis or city-state, fiercely proud and stubbornly independent. Unity was rare. Rivalry was constant. In time, Athens and Sparta would become the most famous of these city-states. But in these early days, the seeds of that fierce independence were already sprouting. It's easy to see why, in Age of Empires the Skidoo, the Greek civilization is imagined with disciplined ranks of long-speared hoplites marching in unison, each soldier a part of a greater phalanx, unyielding, methodical, and devastating up close. In truth, the Greeks would perfect such formations centuries later, turning them into symbols of discipline and courage. But in this early age, the Greek fighting spirit was still being forged, not just in battle, but in their relationship with the sea, the land, and each other. A small people, scattered and often divided, yet their ambition reached far beyond their shores. They dreamed not only of defending their islands and peninsulas, but of leaving their mark across the known world. They were like the very waters that surrounded them, restless, uncontained, and always moving. And so, under the blazing Mediterranean sun, the first echoes of Greek civilization rang out. Not in the clamor of vast armies, but in the rhythmic slap of oars on water, the murmur of traders bargaining in coastal markets, and the chants of poets recounting the deeds of gods and heroes. Every voyage across the Aegean was not just a journey. It was a thread in the vast tapestry that would one day be called the Greek world. But where there is sea, there is also storm. The waters that carried them to prosperity could just as easily bring destruction. Raiders could appear without warning, and rival city-states could choke off vital trade routes. To survive, the Greeks would have to become not only sailors and merchants, but warriors, masters of both the blade and the wave. In the distance, thunder rolls over the horizon. The camera pulls back, revealing the vast sprawl of the Mediterranean, the islands scattered like stepping stones between continents. Somewhere out there, the Minoan ghosts still whisper in the halls of Knossos, and Mycenaean spears still glint in the minds of poets. Soon, these scattered people will take their first steps toward unity, not through treaties or empires, but through the rise of the polis, the city-state that would become the heartbeat of Greek life. The oars strike faster now, the sails snap in the wind. Ahead lies the next chapter of their story, a tale not of a single Greece, but of many, each with its own pride, its own gods, and its own destiny. The echoes of the Mediterranean are growing louder, and they will soon become the roar of history. The sun rises over a jagged horizon, casting long beams of gold across the marble columns and tiled roofs. In the valley below, the air is alive with sound. Merchants calling out their wares, philosophers debating under shaded colonnades, blacksmiths striking sparks from bronze and iron. This is the agora, the beating heart of the Greek polis. The camera sweeps through the crowd. Farmers with baskets of figs and olives, soldiers in bronze breastplates inspecting fresh forged spearheads, and scholars tracing lines in the dust as they argue about the nature of justice or the movement of the stars. Above it all, the white marble of temples gleams in the sun, their shadows stretching like guardians over the city. The polis, literally city, but in truth so much more than that, was the foundation of Greek civilization. It was not just a place of walls and markets. It was a community bound by shared laws, gods, and identity. Each polis was a world unto itself. Athens, with its bustling port of Piraeus and its love of art, drama, and democratic debate. Sparta, landlocked and austere, with fields tilled by helots and boys molded into warriors from the age of 7. Corinth, wealthy and cunning, guarding the narrow isthmus between two seas like a gatekeeper of the Peloponnese. In geography, the Greek landscape made unity difficult. Rugged mountains divided regions, the sea separated islands by days of sailing. Instead of one central empire, Greece was a patchwork of fiercely independent city-states, each with its own government, military, economy, and ambitions. No king or council ruled them all, at least not for long. This independence was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it bred creativity. With no single authority dictating thought or policy, ideas bloomed in 1,000 different gardens. One polis might experiment with democracy, while another clung to monarchy. Some embraced trade and art. Others built their society around war. Rivalry pushed each to innovate, to be stronger, smarter, richer than their neighbors. Like sparks from a hammer's strike, these competitions lit the fires of philosophy, theater, architecture, and strategy. Yet this same independence also sowed the seeds of division. Pride could turn to jealousy, ambition to suspicion. The walls of one polis might guard against foreign invaders, but often they also bristled against Greek neighbors. Alliances shifted like the tides. Friendships could crumble overnight. And when disputes rose to war, as they inevitably did, the cost was paid in Greek blood spilled on Greek soil. Through the eyes of a modern strategist, it was almost as if each polis was a separate civilization in its own right. Like playing Age of Empires Deuce with multiple allied players on the same team, each building their own army, each with its own style, and sometimes deciding to turn those armies against one another. There was no central empire to dictate orders. Instead, there were countless independent powers operating side by side or head to head depending on the winds of politics. The agora was where the soul of the polis could be felt most vividly. Imagine standing there on a summer morning, the scent of fresh bread and grilled fish mingling in the air. Traders shout prices in voices roughened by salt air and long voyages. A group of young men leans against a pillar. Their conversation, a mix of laughter and heated argument about whether the gods intervene in mortal affairs. Nearby, a politician stands atop a stone block, his hands raised, rallying support for a new law. The sun filters through the gaps in the marble columns, painting shifting patterns on the ground as the day grows warmer. In Athens, the agora was a theater of ideas. Citizens gathered to debate policies, challenge leaders, and dream aloud about the future. In Sparta, the open square was smaller, simpler, a place for mustering warriors or issuing orders. In Corinth, it buzzed with the sound of coin and commerce. deals struck with a handshake and sealed with a cup of wine. Despite their differences, all polis shared a fierce sense of belonging. To be Athenian was not simply to live in Athens. It was to share in its pride, its history, its fate. The same was true for Spartans, Corinthians, Thebans, and every other Greek citizen. Their loyalty was first to their city-state, and only distantly, if at all, to any idea of a greater Greece. This loyalty was powerful, but it was also dangerous. When foreign enemies came, whether pirates raiding the coasts or vast armies marching from Persia, the polis could unite, forming leagues and alliances that shook the ancient world. But when the threat faded, unity fractured like a clay pot dropped on stone. Old rivalries rekindled, neighbors became foes. The very system that had allowed Greek civilization to flourish also made it fragile. The camera drifts upward, pulling away from the bustling agora, showing the entire polis from above. The Acropolis crowned with temples, the streets winding like veins through neighborhoods, the harbor bristling with masts. Beyond the walls, the fields stretched toward distant mountains, and beyond those mountains, another polis, with its own Acropolis, its own agora, its own pride. In this delicate balance between cooperation and competition, between unity and independence, lies the heartbeat of Greek history. It is a heartbeat that will grow louder in the coming chapters. When these proud city-states stand shoulder to shoulder against a common enemy, and then, inevitably, turn those same spears against one another. The sun sets over the marble columns, casting long shadows across the square. In the fading light, the voices of the agora grow softer, replaced by the slow toll of a bronze bell calling the council to session. Decisions made here will shape the destiny of the polis and of Greece itself. But even as the debates rage into the night, a storm is already brewing far beyond the Aegean. To the east, across the sea, an empire vast and unyielding is watching. Soon, the Greek city-states will have to decide whether their independence is worth defending, and whether they can stand together long enough to survive. The morning sun spills over the Acropolis, turning the pale marble to molten gold. From the rocky slopes below, the city stirs. Merchants hauling carts of olives and figs to the agora, children darting between colonnades, and priests in white robes ascending the steps to the temple of Athena. Above them all, high on the hill, a forest of scaffolding embraces a rising giant, the Parthenon. Dust swirls in the warm air as masons hammer stone into shape. The sharp chisel strikes ringing like music against the hum of the city. Blocks of pentelic marble, so white they seem to drink the sunlight, are hoisted by ropes and pulleys into place. Fine powder coats the workers' arms and faces, turning them into living statues. Each tap of the hammer, each groan of the crane, is part of something larger. Not just a building, but a declaration. This is Athens. This is the heart of a civilization. Athens was more than a polis. It was an idea. A place where the voices of citizens shaped the laws they lived under, where debate was not just tolerated, but celebrated. In the Nix assembly, thousands of men gathered under the open sky to argue about war, trade, and justice. A farmer could speak after a general. A craftsman could challenge a statesman. This was the birthplace of democracy. Not perfect, not for everyone. Women, slaves, and foreigners were excluded, but revolutionary for its time. In the shade of porticos, philosophers tested the boundaries of thought. Socrates, barefoot and unshaven, roamed the agora, asking questions that cut deeper than any sword. His students and their students after them, Plato, Aristotle, would lay the foundations of Western philosophy. Their words, etched into wax tablets and papyrus scrolls, would outlast empires. Athens was a city of the arts as much as of ideas. The theater of Dionysus, filled with crowds eager to see the latest plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, or Euripides. Their tragedies explored the pride of kings, the wrath of gods, the frailty of human will. Sculptors shaped gods and heroes in marble and bronze, their forms so lifelike that centuries later, we still marvel at their perfection. Painters adorned pottery with scenes of myth and history, each brushstroke a record of the world they knew. Architecture rose to match the city's ambitions. The Parthenon itself was not merely a temple. It was a monument to Athena, patron goddess of wisdom and war, and a statement to all who approached the city by sea. Here is power. Here is beauty. Here is a people who shape stone as deftly as they shape law and thought. Athens' advantages were as clear as the Aegean sky: creativity, adaptability, and a vision that stretched beyond survival toward excellence. Surrounded by seas, they became skilled sailors and traders, drawing wealth from across the Mediterranean. Their navy was the envy of the ancient world. A shield and a spear in one, protecting their allies, intimidating their rivals, and ensuring that the goods, ideas, and art of Athens flowed freely. And yet, beneath the brilliance, shadows gathered. The same confidence that fueled Athens' golden age could slip into arrogance. A belief in their own superiority sometimes blinded them to danger. Rivals like Sparta, hardened and disciplined, watched Athens' growing influence with suspicion. Even allies in the Delian League began to whisper about Athenian dominance, how protection felt uncomfortably like control. It was a delicate balance. Athens' light shone brightly, but every light casts a shadow. And the brighter the flame, the more it draws the wind. The streets of Athens were alive with contrasts. In one quarter, the clang of hammers as bronze was shaped into armor. In another, the soft murmur of students reading poetry beneath olive trees. Ships unloaded amphorae of wine from Chios, silver from Laurium's mines, and exotic goods from Egypt and the Levant. At the same time, rumors drifted through the markets of skirmishes with Corinth, of Spartan envoys demanding concessions, of distant Persian eyes still watching from across the sea. If the Greek world were imagined in a game like Age of Empires: The Situ, Athens would be the civilization that invests heavily in research and culture, producing units and strategies that are clever, efficient, and elegant. Their hoplites could hold a line, their triremes could dominate the waves. But their true weapon was innovation, the ability to adapt and surprise. Yet, as every strategist knows, overconfidence can be fatal, especially when surrounded by rivals waiting for the right moment to strike. Still, in these years, Athens seemed unstoppable. Its artists redefined beauty, its thinkers reshaped truth, and its statesmen steered a democracy that, despite its flaws, inspired loyalty from its citizens and admiration from afar. From the heights of the Acropolis, one could gaze across the blue Aegean and feel as if the whole world were within reach. The camera pulls back from the Parthenon, still unfinished, to reveal the city sprawling toward the sea, its walls glinting in the afternoon light. Beyond the harbor, ships depart in every direction, messengers of trade, culture, and influence. But far beyond the horizon, unseen by the people of Athens, forces are gathering that will test everything they have built. Athens is a beacon, a lighthouse in the storm of history. But even the strongest flame is vulnerable to the wind, and the winds of Greece are fickle. Soon, This city of marble and thought will find itself not in debate halls or theaters, but on battlefields. Its fate decided not by words or plays, but by the clash of shield against shield. The hammer falls again on the Parthenon's stone. Dust rises. The workers do not know it. But they are building not only a temple, but a monument to an age that will one day end. The sun blazes down on the dusty training ground, turning the air into a shimmering haze. Beneath its unrelenting heat, a group of boys, no older than 7, march in unison, bare feet crunching over the dry earth. Their thin tunics cling to sweat-slicked skin, their small hands gripping wooden spears. An older warrior, his face lined and weathered by decades of battle, paces alongside them, barking commands. The crack of a whip on the ground startles the slowest among them. The boy does not cry. In Sparta, tears are a luxury reserved for the weak, and weakness is not tolerated. Here, childhood ends almost as soon as it begins. From the age of 7, Spartan boys are taken from their families and thrust into the agoge, a brutal system designed to forge them into warriors. Hunger gnaws at their stomachs, cold bites at their bones, and pain becomes a constant companion. They are taught to steal, but punished if caught, not because theft is wrong, but because failure is unacceptable. It is a world where every hardship is a lesson, every scar a badge of honor. The Spartan ideal is clear. A citizen is not born, he is made, and he is made through fire. The city of Sparta itself reflects this philosophy. No grand marble temples like Athens, no bustling marketplaces overflowing with foreign luxuries. Instead, the streets are practical, the buildings unadorned, and the people hardened. Wealth is measured not in gold, but in strength and loyalty. The entire society is a war machine. Every man a soldier, every woman the mother of soldiers. Even the women are trained to be physically strong, believing that only strong mothers can bear strong sons. In this world, war is not a distant possibility. It is the center of life. Spartan warriors form the Phalanx, a wall of shields and spears that moves as one. Individually, they are deadly. Together, they are nearly unstoppable. Discipline is absolute. In battle, the order is simple. Come back with your shield, or on it. Retreat is dishonor. Survival without victory is disgrace. It is here, in the Peloponnesus, that Sparta becomes the immovable wall of Greece. While Athens shines like a beacon of culture, Sparta stands like a fortress of iron, guarding the land against any threat. And threats are constant. Rival city-states may squabble among themselves, but when foreign invaders loom, Persians, Macedonians, anyone bold enough to challenge Greece, it is often the Spartans who stand in the front lines. The advantages of this system are undeniable. Spartan armies are feared across the Mediterranean. Their unity is absolute, their courage legendary. Unlike the shifting politics of Athens, where public opinion sways with the winds of debate, Spartan decisions are firm, deliberate, and backed by a military capable of enforcing them. Yet the weaknesses are just as real. A society that worships discipline and tradition leaves little room for innovation. While Athens experiments with new ideas in philosophy, art, and technology, Sparta resists change, clinging to its time-tested ways. In the short term, this makes them stable. In the long term, it leaves them vulnerable to the changing tides of history. The contrast between Athens and Sparta could not be sharper. One city builds empires of the mind, the other forges empires of the spear. In the great tapestry of Greek civilization, they are the yin and yang, each powerful in their own right, yet doomed to clash. Even in the world of Age of Empires II, you won't find a unique Spartan unit. Yet the spirit of Sparta lives on in the Greek hoplite and its upgrades, the Phalanx and the Champion. On the battlefield, these units embody the same iron discipline, the same relentless advance that once made Spartan warriors the terror of their enemies. They march not for glory, not for wealth, but for the survival and honor of their homeland. Picture the scene. A narrow mountain pass, the wind howling through jagged cliffs. A small band of warriors stands shoulder to shoulder, their shields interlocked, their spears angled toward the enemy. Across the valley, an army 100 times their size approaches, banners snapping in the wind. There is no fear in the Spartans' eyes, only the cold resolve of men who have been taught since birth that death is merely the final duty to the state. In moments like this, the Spartan creed becomes clear. They do not fight because they believe they will survive. They fight because they refuse to bow. And so, the legend of Sparta grows, not from victories alone, but from the stories of impossible stands, of battles fought against overwhelming odds, of warriors who held the line until their last breath. History will remember them not just as soldiers, but as the living embodiment of defiance. Yet beneath this steel wall lies the seed of their own undoing. A society built entirely on war must constantly find enemies to fight, or risk collapsing under its own weight. And when the battles end, when peace demands a different kind of strength, Sparta will find itself unprepared. For now, however, the Peloponnesian sun glints off polished bronze, and the rhythm of training drums echoes through the valley. The warriors march, the shields clash, and the vow of never retreat rings in the air like a prophecy. The storm between Athens and Sparta is coming, and when it breaks, the steel wall will be tested, not just by foreign invaders, but by the fires of Greek civil war itself. The sound comes first. Deep, thunderous, relentless. War drums echo across the Aegean, each beat rolling like distant thunder over the restless sea. The wind lashes the coastline, snapping the banners of Greek city-states into wild motion. On the horizon, dark shapes gather. Persian sails, dozens at first, then hundreds, blotting out the line between ocean and sky. The invasion has begun. The Persian Empire, vast as the sands of the East, believes it can crush Greece in a single sweep. But the Greeks are no strangers to impossible odds. From the rugged hills of Sparta to the marble streets of Athens, messengers run with the same urgent call: to arms. I's first wave, Marathon, 490 BCE. The plain of Marathon stretches before them, a flat expanse bordered by hills and marshes. The Athenians stand in formation, outnumbered at least 2-1. Their bronze armor catches the early morning light, their shields forming an unbroken wall. Across the field, the Persians, lightly armored, confident in their numbers, prepare for what they think will be an easy victory. The order comes. The Greek hoplites break into a run, an audacious move for heavy infantry. Shields lock, spears thrust, and the first Persian line shatters under the weight of the charge. The Athenians push forward, driving the enemy back toward the sea. By day's end, the Persian fleet retreats, leaving the plain littered with their dead. It is the first sign that Greek discipline and terrain knowledge can turn even the largest enemy into prey. In Age of Empires II, it's like micromanaging a smaller army to strike exactly where the enemy is weakest, few in number, but deadly precise. Conqu's second wave, Thermopylae, 480 BCE. 10 years later, the drums return, louder, closer. The Persians, now under King Xerxes, bring a force so massive it's said to drink rivers dry. But to reach the heart of Greece, they must pass through Thermopylae, a narrow mountain pass where numbers mean little. 300 Spartans, backed by a few thousand allies, take position. Shields interlock. Spears bristle like the teeth of a predator. The Persians hurl wave after wave at the wall of bronze, but the pass holds. For 2 days, the Greeks carve through the enemy ranks, each kill bought with blood and sweat. On the 3rd day, betrayal cracks the defense. A hidden path is revealed to the Persians, and the Spartans are surrounded. Leonidas, their king, does not order retreat. Instead, he tells his men to fight until the last breath. They die where they stand, buying time for Greece to rally. Thermopylae becomes more than a battle. It becomes a symbol that freedom can stand against tyranny, even if it must stand on a pile of its own dead. In AoE 2 terms, it's the perfect choke point defense. Hold long enough, and reinforcements or strategy shifts can turn the tide, even if you lose the army in the process. On a 3rd wave, Salamis, 480 BCE. The Persian army marches deeper into Greece, but at sea, Athens plots revenge. Themistocles, master of strategy, lures the massive Persian navy into the Straits of Salamis, waters too narrow for their numbers to matter. Greek triremes, fast, maneuverable, and deadly at close range, dart between the lumbering Persian vessels. Bronze rams smash into wooden hulls, splintering them like kindling. Smoke rises, the sea churns red, and the Persians, unable to bring their full force to bear, falter. By the day's end, their fleet is in ruins, their ambition shattered. This is where the Greek genius shines, using the environment to erase numerical disadvantage. Just as in AoE 2, the right map control, forcing the enemy into tight spaces, turns a desperate defense into a decisive victory. The Persian invasions will continue in lesser forms, but these 3 battles, Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, become the heartbeat of Greek unity. Terrain, discipline, and cunning outmatch overwhelming numbers. And for a moment, the Greek city-states, so often at each other's throats, stand as one wall against the tide. But unity is a fragile thing. The drums will soon return, not from across the sea, but from within Greece itself. The sea was finally calm. The drumbeats of war had faded into the distance, replaced by the steady rhythm of oars carrying merchant ships across the glittering Aegean. In the wake of the Persian wars, Athens stood like a victorious hero, scarred but unbroken, and now rising taller than ever before. The smoke of burning cities had cleared, and in its place came the scent of fresh-cut marble, the laughter of children in the agora, and the measured debates of philosophers whose words would outlast empires. Athens had emerged not only as the savior of Greece, but as its leader. At the center of this transformation was the Delian League, an alliance of city-states bound by the shared memory of Persian aggression. Ostensibly formed for mutual defense, its treasury, filled with gold contributions from across the Aegean, was kept on the sacred island of Delos. But over time, the wealth drifted toward Athens, and with it, the balance of power. The city became the beating heart of the Greek world, pumping culture, commerce, and influence into every corner of the sea. From the Acropolis, the world looked unstoppable. Gak, the cinematic Athens. Imagine walking through Athens in this age. The air carries the scent of fresh paint from a sculptor's workshop, where chisel strikes against marble ring like the rhythm of a heartbeat. painters mix crushed minerals into brilliant colors, ready to adorn temples and public buildings. In the theater of Dionysus, poets and playwrights are weaving tales, comedies that poke at human folly and tragedies that lay bare the pain of gods and mortals alike. Citizens gather in the agora, the marketplace alive with voices. Some trade olives and wine, others exchange ideas about justice, beauty, and the nature of the soul. The Parthenon, still under construction, towers above the city, a temple to Athena, the protector of the polis. Workers swarm over its skeleton of white stone, cranes creak under the weight of massive columns, and fine dust floats in the sunlight. It is more than a building, it is a declaration. Athens has risen and will never bow again. On the power and the danger, Athens' rise was not only artistic, but political. Pericles, the statesman whose vision defined this age, championed democracy in a form the world had never seen before. Every citizen, regardless of wealth, had the right to speak and vote in the assembly. It was messy, loud, and often slow. But it gave the Athenians a sense of ownership over their city unmatched anywhere else. With the Delian League's treasury at their disposal, Athens built a navy that ruled the waves. Their triremes, sleek, deadly, and faster than almost any rival vessel, ensured that the city's influence reached far beyond the Greek mainland. Trade flourished, colonies grew, and tribute poured in. The streets shone with imported goods, Egyptian grain, Thracian gold, and spices from lands that seemed like dreams. Yet, beneath the marble and music, a shadow was growing. The same wealth that funded temples and theaters also bred arrogance. Allies began to realize that the Delian League was less a partnership and more an empire in disguise. City-states that tried to leave found themselves facing Athenian fleets at their harbors. Freedom, once the rallying cry against Persia, became a word that Athens applied only when convenient. AoE2's quiet parallel. In Age of Empires the Vakku, the Greek units aren't the fastest nor the most numerous. But in the right hands, disciplined and coordinated, they can dominate the map. Athens in the real world was much the same. They didn't just win battles with force, they won them with strategy, timing, and resources. Wielding influence like a player who knows that economy and culture can be as powerful as spears and swords. But, just like in the game, overextension is a risk. Pushed too far, and even the strongest position can crumble. Like light before the storm. From the outside, this was an age of pure brilliance. Philosophers like Socrates walked the streets, questioning the nature of truth. Artists carved statues so lifelike that they seemed ready to step down from their pedestals. The theater became a mirror for society, daring citizens to laugh at themselves or weep for imagined kings. Science, mathematics, and architecture advanced hand in hand, making Athens not just a city, but an idea. A beacon for anyone who dreamed of a life ruled by reason and beauty. But every beacon casts a shadow. In the south, across the rugged hills of the Peloponnesus, Sparta watched. They saw the gold flowing into Athens, the navy patrolling the seas, the monuments rising higher each year. They saw a city that had once been an ally turn into something dangerously close to a tyrant. And Sparta was not a city to watch quietly for long. And the foreshadowing Pericles stood one evening on the steps of the Parthenon, gazing at their horizon. The sun was setting, staining the Aegean red and gold. Ships dotted the waters, some carrying tribute, others soldiers returning from enforcing the League's will. He must have felt the pride of a man whose vision was coming true. Yet perhaps, deep down, He also knew that such brilliance cannot shine forever without attracting envy, fear, and challenge. In the coming years, Athens' golden light would meet the cold steel of Sparta, and the war that followed would not be against foreign invaders, but brother against brother, a war that would tear the Greek world apart. The drums were silent now, but somewhere beyond the mountains, another rhythm was beginning, one that would not stop until the light of the Golden Age was shattered. The sky over the Aegean had turned the color of ash. Rain fell in cold, slanting sheets, drumming against the decks of warships and hissing as it struck their burning hulls. Once, these vessels had carried proud men across clear blue waters, their sails swelling with the same wind that brought merchants to Athens and grain to Sparta. Now, the ships burned in the storm, their masts collapsing into the sea like blackened bones. From the shoreline came the sound of shouting, urgent, desperate, carried through the roar of waves. Somewhere among the chaos, bronze shields clashed, boots pounded across slick stone, and blood ran down the white marble steps of a city under siege. This was no foreign invasion. No distant empire had come to enslave them. The men who now hurled javelins and raised swords against one another spoke the same tongue, worshipped the same gods, and once had stood together against the great Persian threat. But in the year 431 BC, Athens and Sparta, two pillars of Greek civilization, turned their blades inward. What began as a political quarrel would stretch into a 27-year war of attrition, consuming an entire generation and leaving Greece fractured beyond repair. The Peloponnesian War was, at its core, a clash of visions. Athens, at the height of its golden age, was the radiant center of art, philosophy, and commerce. It led the Delian League, a naval alliance that kept Persian ambitions in check and filled the city's coffers. Sparta, the steel-hearted land power of the Peloponnesus, led the Peloponnesian League, bound not by commerce, but by the iron discipline of hoplites and the austere unity of its allies. Each city-state saw itself as the rightful guardian of Greece's future. Each believed the other's growing influence threatened that destiny. At first, the war unfolded in cycles of strategy and counter-strategy. Pericles, Ars, the Athenian leader, avoided direct land battles with Sparta's superior infantry. Instead, Athens relied on its unmatched navy, striking along coastlines, raiding supply lines, and protecting its trade. But Sparta's king Archidamus II used a slower, grinding approach, marching into Attica year after year, burning crops, forcing Athens to retreat behind its long walls. The Athenians had food from their ports, but the overcrowding soon birthed a silent enemy worse than any spear: plague. It spread through the cramped streets like wildfire in summer brush, claiming tens of thousands, citizens, soldiers, even Pericles himself. In the agora, debates turned from policy to survival. Families whispered prayers at makeshift shrines. The marble Parthenon still gleamed in the sun, but its steps were stained with the ashes of funeral pyres. For a brief time, Athens recovered. New leaders, new tactics. There was hope again when Athenian fleets sailed west toward Sicily in 415 BC. A bold gamble to strike at Syracuse and secure control of vital grain routes. But the Sicilian expedition proved catastrophic. Poor planning, political infighting, and fierce resistance turned it into a nightmare. The once proud fleet was annihilated. Thousands of Athenian hoplites captured or killed. The news struck Athens like a thunderclap. Even in the dramatized campaigns of a strategy game, it would be the moment when your seemingly unstoppable army is wiped from the map in a single, crushing blow. Sparta seized the advantage. With Persian gold now funding their navy, they broke Athens' dominance at sea. One by one, Athenian allies defected. Starvation tightened its grip on the city. By 404 BC, Sparta's ships blockaded the Piraeus, and her hoplites stood at the gates. Inside Athens, silence replaced debate. Bread was scarce. Even hope had been rationed. When the final surrender came, there was no triumphant cheer. The victors tore down the long walls to the sound of Spartan flutes, a symbolic dismantling of Athens' pride. For the first time in decades, the Aegean lay quiet, but it was not the peace of harmony. It was the hush of exhaustion, of a land bled dry. The Peloponnesian War did not crown a lasting victor. Sparta, though triumphant, found itself ruling an unstable Greece. Athens, though defeated, retained its cultural soul. But its days of political supremacy were gone. The war had gnawed away at the very foundation of Greek unity, leaving city-states suspicious and divided. It was as if the mighty phalanx that once stood unbroken at Marathon had turned its shields inward, piercing itself with its own spears. The emotional toll was perhaps the deepest wound. Veterans returned to find their homes empty, their fields overgrown. Children had grown up in the shadow of siege and scarcity. Their stories shaped not by heroes and poets, but by hunger and funerals. The grandeur of temples and theaters still stood, but the laughter that had once filled them now felt like an echo from another age. And yet, in the ashes of defeat, there remained the stubborn ember of Greek resilience. Artists still carved marble into forms that would outlast empires. Philosophers still gathered to question, to teach, to dream. Even in loss, there was a refusal to surrender entirely to despair. But the unity that had once made Greece formidable was gone, and in its place lay a patchwork of rivalries that would, in time, open the door to a new power rising from the north. Macedonia. The war had begun with rain on marble and fire on the sea. It ended with silence and a horizon already darkened by the shadow of Alexander's father, Philip II. The brothers who had turned their blades against each other had not only wounded themselves, they had invited the next conqueror to walk through the cracks. The ashes of the Peloponnesian War still clung to the marble stones of Greece. Cities lay weary, walls bore scars from sieges, and the agora, once alive with the hum of philosophy and trade, now whispered with mistrust. The great city-states that had once rivaled each other in glory were now shadows of themselves, exhausted by decades of internal bloodshed. And into this fractured landscape, from the rugged northern lands beyond Mount Olympus, came a man whose ambitions would change the map of the ancient world, Philip II of Macedon. Philip was no stranger to Greek culture. In his youth, he had been a hostage in Thebes, and there he studied the discipline of the hoplite phalanx, the art of politics, and the delicate balance of power between city-states. But when he returned to Macedon, he did not merely imitate the Greeks, he reshaped their methods, forged them into something deadlier. His soldiers carried spears twice the length of the traditional dory, their sarissas bristling like a moving forest of death. His cavalry, swift and disciplined, struck with precision, hammering enemies against the unyielding wall of the phalanx. To the south, the Greeks barely noticed at first. Athens still clung to its fleet and rhetoric, Sparta to its old glory. But Philip's Macedon grew stronger with each passing year, uniting the wild highland tribes, forging alliances where possible, and crushing resistance where necessary. The city-states, locked in their petty rivalries, failed to see the storm gathering beyond their borders. The storm broke at Chaeronea in 338 BCE. Under a blazing sun, Philip's forces clashed with the combined armies of Athens and Thebes. It was here that Philip's son, a young prince named Alexander, commanded the Macedonian cavalry with ferocity beyond his years. When the dust settled, the proud Greek armies lay shattered. Their dreams of independence trampled beneath Macedonian boots. Philip did not raise their cities. Instead, he offered unity under his leadership for a grand campaign against a greater enemy, Persia. The irony was bitter. Greece, which had once stood defiant against the Persian Empire at Marathon and Salamis, was now too weak to lead such a campaign on its own. Yet Philip's vision stirred something deep in the Hellenic soul, a chance to turn outward again, to channel their warrior spirit and ambition beyond their fractured homeland. But fate would grant Philip only the dream, not its execution. In 336 BCE, he was assassinated under mysterious circumstances, leaving the throne to his 20-year-old son. That son was Alexander III of Macedon, soon to be known as Alexander the Great. If Philip had been a storm, Alexander was lightning. Within 2 years, he crushed rebellions in Greece, securing loyalty with both awe and fear. At Thebes, he made an example. The city that dared to defy him was leveled, its survivors sold into slavery. Athens, watching the smoke rise over Thebes, chose words over spears. The Greek world was now unified, but it was unity born not from democracy or alliance, but from the sheer will of one man. With Greece secured, Alexander turned east. At the head of an army that blended the best of Greek and Macedonian might. Hoplites alongside Sarissa-bearing Phalangites, elite cavalry from Thessaly, archers from Crete. He crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor. The first clash with Persia at the Granicus River was swift and decisive, but it was only the beginning. The true test came at Gaugamela in 331 BCE. The scene was chaos and grandeur all at once. The horizon shimmering under the heat, the Persian host stretching as far as the eye could see. Their war chariots armed with scything blades, their ranks thick with archers and cavalry. Against this vast sea of soldiers, Alexander's army looked small, but every man was a sharpened blade in the hand of a master. Dust swirled in great clouds as the battle began. The Persian chariots thundered forward, but disciplined Greek and Macedonian ranks opened just enough to let them pass, spears thrusting upward to strike horses and drivers alike. On the right flank, Alexander himself led the companion cavalry in a wedge formation, eyes fixed on the heart of the Persian line where King Darius III stood. At the perfect moment, he charged, the ground shaking under the pounding hooves, the clash of bronze and iron echoing like thunder. In the chaos, Darius fled, his army's morale shattering. By sunset, the Persian Empire, the very force that had once threatened Greece itself, was broken. Alexander claimed not only victory, but a vast empire stretching from the Aegean to the heart of Asia. And yet, for Greece, this was a strange triumph. The culture of the polis, the independence of Athens, the iron pride of Sparta, all were now subordinate to the will of a single king. Greek ideas would spread farther than ever before, carried on the march to Egypt, Babylon, and beyond. The Parthenon would remain standing, but decisions about war and peace were no longer made beneath its columns. The Greeks had gained a place in an empire larger than any they had dreamed of. But it was not their empire. In the glow of conquest, many did not notice the subtle truth. Greece had been united. But in losing its divisions, it had also lost its freedom. And as Alexander pushed eastward, chasing horizons beyond the Indus, the heart of Greece beat quieter, its voice drowned by the roar of an empire that now belonged to the world. Some would see this as destiny fulfilled. Others would whisper that the price was too high. But no one could deny it. The age of the city-states was over. And yet, as history would prove, even the mightiest empires are not immune to time's erosion. For when Alexander's flame burned out, the Greek world would once again face a crossroads, and new shadows would fall from the west. The first Roman ships appeared over the horizon like silent predators, their dark sails swelling against the wind. The waves slapped against their hulls with a steady rhythm, as if the sea itself was marking the countdown to the inevitable. In the harbors of Greece, merchants paused mid-transaction, children clutched their mothers' robes, and the elders stared toward the approaching fleet with a quiet recognition. This was not a raid, not a passing threat, but the beginning of something permanent. Rome had come not as a curious visitor or an equal ally, but as a conqueror. It began subtly at first, alliances forged in the name of mutual protection, treaties that favored Roman influence, and trade agreements that tilted power toward the west. But soon, the eagle standards marched through the mountain passes, and the disciplined legions set foot on the marble streets of the polis. The banners of Athens, Sparta, Corinth, and Thebes still fluttered in the wind, but everyone knew they were now shadows of their former authority. Rome held the sword, and Rome dictated the terms. And yet, the conquest was not the kind the Greeks had known before. The Romans, for all their iron discipline and ruthless efficiency, looked upon the culture of Greece with awe. The marble temples gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, the theaters carved into hillsides, the delicate balance of logic and beauty in Greek thought. All of it struck the Romans not as something to be destroyed, but as something to be possessed. In the bustling streets of Athens, the agora still thrummed with life. Philosophers still debated beneath the colonnades, their voices rising above the clatter of sandals on stone. Sculptors still chipped away at blocks of white marble, coaxing out forms that seemed to breathe. Playwrights still filled the air with stories of gods and men, heroes and tragedies. But now, among the crowd, Roman soldiers stood watch, helmets gleaming, short swords at their sides. They were not here to silence the voices of Greece. They were here to ensure those voices spoke within Rome's rule. In this strange new world, Greece had lost its political sovereignty, but gained something paradoxical, an audience larger than it had ever known. Roman generals sent their sons to study under Athenian philosophers. Senators commissioned copies of Greek statues to adorn their villas. Latin absorbed Greek words for philosophy, science, and art. The Roman stage adopted Greek drama, and Roman law borrowed from Greek ideas of citizenship and justice. The conqueror had taken the body of Greece, but in doing so, it had embraced its soul. From the steps of the Parthenon, one could still look out over the city and see the same sunlit hills, the same sparkling waters, the same timeless stone. The difference lay in the sound. The Latin orders barked in the distance, the disciplined march of legionnaires replacing the clamor of hoplite drills. The political assemblies of the polis were gone, their power replaced by Roman governors who answered only to the Senate. For many, it was a bitter truth. Greece had traded the independence of its city-states for a place in Rome's sprawling, unyielding empire. But the Greeks were not merely passive in this exchange. In their own quiet way, they began to shape Rome from within. If the Romans had mastered the art of war and governance, The Greeks became the silent tutors of their minds. Aristotle's philosophy shaped Roman statesmen. Euclid's geometry built their aqueducts and roads. Hippocrates' medicine tended their soldiers. Homer's epics, once sung in Greek marketplaces, now echoed in Roman forums. It was a strange kind of victory, the victory of the conquered. Political freedom was gone, perhaps forever. But Greek culture seeped so deeply into Rome that it became impossible to separate the two. As centuries passed, the Mediterranean world spoke of Greco-Roman civilization, as if the two were always meant to be one. And yet, beneath this fusion lay a quiet sorrow. The festivals of old still lit the night skies, but they were now spectacles for Roman governors and visiting dignitaries. The debates of philosophers still turned over questions of ethics and governance. But their conclusions had no power to change the laws imposed from afar. Greek art, once the expression of a free people, was now often created to satisfy Roman tastes. Still, for all the loss, the Greeks knew they had planted something enduring. In the libraries of Alexandria, in the scrolls carried by Roman scholars, in the architectural principles copied in distant provinces, their ideas lived on. Even as Rome expanded into Gaul, Britain, and the deserts of the East. It carried Greece with it, not as a captive, but as a treasured companion. In the flicker of lamplight within the great libraries, young Roman students bent over Greek texts, mouthing words in a foreign but beautiful tongue. In the shadow of the Acropolis, a Roman poet tried to capture the rhythm of Homer's lines. In distant provinces, Roman architects designed buildings with the columns and proportions they had learned from Greek masters. For Greece, it was a reminder that empires rise and fall. But ideas, if they are powerful enough, can survive their creators. The spear had given way to the scroll, the phalanx to the philosopher. And in this subtle transformation, Greece achieved a form of immortality. Rome might have ruled the land, but in the minds of the people, the wisdom of Greece remained sovereign. The empire could command armies, but it could not command the human imagination. And in the centuries to come, when Rome itself began to crumble, it would be the ideas of Greece, reborn in the Renaissance, carried forward by scholars, that would light the way again. It was the ultimate irony. Greece, under the shadow of Rome, had outlived its conqueror. And in the distance, as the sun set over the marble temples, the sea whispered against the shore, carrying with it the quiet truth that freedom can take many forms. And sometimes, the most enduring victories are won without a single drop of blood. The day was ending over Athens. The sun hung low, a molten disk bleeding gold and crimson into the Aegean Sea, and its dying light brushed the columns of the Parthenon with fire. In the stillness, even the air seemed to hold its breath. Slow motion in the mind's eye. The marble pillars, worn by centuries of wind and rain, still stood proud against the sky. The great statue of Athena, though long weathered, still watched over the city with an unyielding gaze. Shadows stretched across the Acropolis, long fingers of history reaching from the past into the present. The Greece of empires and armies, of city-states locked in fierce rivalry, was gone. The once feared warships no longer patrolled the seas. No Spartan phalanx stood ready in the mountain passes. No Athenian assembly roared with debate over matters of war and peace. The land had changed rulers, first Macedon, then Rome, and countless powers thereafter. But the spirit of Greece, that rare blend of brilliance and defiance, refused to fade. In philosophy, the Greek voice still rang clear. Socrates, who chose death over silence, still asked questions that pulled apart the very fabric of certainty. Plato's dialogue still offered worlds of ideas in which the mind could roam freely, challenging the soul to rise above shadows into the light. Aristotle's careful dissections of logic, science, and ethics still formed the foundation upon which generations built their understanding of the world. The Greeks no longer commanded legions, but they commanded thought itself, a dominion far greater and more enduring. In art and architecture, their imprint was eternal. The graceful proportions of their temples became the silent teachers of beauty to all who followed. The Romans copied them, the Renaissance rediscovered them, and modern capitals around the world, whether in Washington, Paris, or London, still dress their halls of power in the language of Greek columns. Even in ruin, the Parthenon symmetry whispered of a civilization that had understood the dialogue between stone and sunlight better than any other. In the theater, their tragedies and comedies still walked the stage. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides still painted the struggles of gods and men with words as sharp as spears. Their plays reminded humanity of its own contradictions, the glory and the folly, the courage and the hubris. When the curtains rise in modern theaters, when actors speak lines that wrestle with fate, justice, and love, they are speaking the Greek language of drama, no matter the tongue. In science and mathematics, their minds had reached far beyond the horizon of their age. Euclid mapped the rules of geometry as if charting the very code of the universe. Archimedes bent the laws of physics to his will, his voice echoing from the walls of Syracuse. "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the world." Hipparchus mapped the stars, while Hippocrates swore physicians to a standard that still binds them today. The Greek pursuit of knowledge was not a passing curiosity. It was an unquenchable fire, and it still burns. In sport, the Olympic Games, born from the Greek desire to honor the gods through the perfection of the human body, remained a beacon across the centuries. Though the ancient games had long ended, their revival in the modern era was not a reinvention, but a homecoming. The same spirit that once filled Olympia with the roar of the crowd and the pounding of athletes' feet now fills stadiums across the globe. When the torch is lit, it is a Greek flame, passed from age to age. And so, in every library, every museum, every school, every stadium, the presence of Greece is felt. They no longer marched under a single banner, but their ideas marched on without armies. No fortress could contain them, no empire could outlast them. There was a paradox to this ending. Greece had vanished as a political power. Its cities no longer dictated terms, its fleets no longer ruled the sea. Yet, in surrendering their independence, they had conquered in another way. For their conquerors, whether Macedonian or Roman, became their students. And in time, so did the rest of the world. Standing before the Parthenon at sunset, one could imagine the voices of the past carried on the wind, the arguments of philosophers echoing in the colonnades, the clash of hoplites still ringing in the stones, the laughter of playwrights bouncing between the steps. History had stripped Greece of its empire, but had not touched the empire of its mind. And so the chapter closed with a truth both humbling and triumphant. They no longer ruled the land beneath their feet, but they ruled the thoughts, the dreams, and the ambitions of humanity itself. The torch they had lit in the dark ages of the world still burned, undimmed by centuries, a light that belonged not just to them, but to all who dared to seek knowledge, beauty, and freedom. They were gone, yet they were everywhere. They had fallen, yet they stood eternal. For while marble crumbles and empires break, ideas endure. And the Greek idea was the greatest of them all. They had lost their world, but they had won the future. If you enjoyed this journey through history and legendary battles, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you won't miss the next episodes. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you think about today's story, or suggest battles, leaders, and civilizations you'd like to see us break down, both from real history and in-game strategy. Every interaction from you is the fuel that keeps this channel bringing the past back to life on your screen.